Good, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Vardiya. I am Yağız Söylev. Today we're here for our fourth digital roundtable with Çağrı, Hakan, Zaman. I would like to thank him once again for accepting our invitation. Çağrı Hakan Zaman is an architect and a computer scientist. He currently pursues a doctoral degree at the MIT Design and Computation Group, and he is a graduate researcher at the MIT Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory. In his research, Çağrı develops immersive virtual reality simulations and other forms of spatial multimedia representations to explore the dynamics of human interactions. He is the co-founder of Mediate VR, a startup company that develops AI-driven collaboration tools for virtual and augmented reality devices. His recent virtual reality project, September 1955, was exhibited at IF Istanbul International Film Festival and was covered by major media outlets. Çağrı holds a professional degree in architecture from Istanbul Technical University, a Master of Science in Design Computation, and a Master of Science in Computer Science from MIT. Yes, so we are really curious to hear your opinions, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you, the Vardiya team, for inviting me for this speech. It's a pleasure to address such a unique audience today. First, let me share my screen so that I can show you presentation that accompany my speech. So when I first received this invitation a while ago, and the specific questions that was asked to me, I tried to find the best way to contribute to the space you already created with my experiences at MIT for the last couple of years. And I hope that at the end of my speech, we will find some answers to these questions. As the theme of this year's Biennale suggests, and the particular way Turkish Pavilion interprets it, I think it's really important to look at this space and how we make it. And I will try to present my work from this point of view. And we can also step into other areas such as the use of technology, the potentials of new realities, and artificial models of perception. And before beginning, I would like to acknowledge the people who contributed this work, because I'm worried that I would forget to mention their names in their respective projects. So I would like to thank my advisors, Professor Terry Knight and Patrick Winston, and all my colleagues, Ege, Julia, Bilge, Neil, Ainsley, and Turan, and Dennis. As a starting point, I would like to propose that everyone knows how to make space, because making space is our primary occupation. It's not something optional, and it is unavoidable. Everyone knows, but almost always ignores this fact. Let me explain what I mean by this. As practitioners, students, architects, or scientists, we often isolate ourselves from our livelihood and our lived spaces. This is a description of anthropologist Tim Ingold, the comparison between building and dwelling perspectives. So on the left, we have a builder, an ex-habitant of the earth. This is not a world this person is dwelling in. It's not a part of it. He is not a part of it. The world is something rather a spectacle for him to look at it. In this view, there is nothing to experience, and because everything is prescribed or prepared for our consumption, we make things in this world, describe things, represent things, but we never experience things. In this world, this is the world of an architect, for example, where we draw or build without the risk of being affected of our creation. We are literally on top of our worlds. On the right, on the other hand, we have a dweller. The dweller is within her world. A dweller experiences the world through everyday practices, through perceptual engagement. For example, this is where we are in a hurry for catching a bus. This is where we are going for dinner. This is where we are being alone or eating or sleeping. Basically, this is the world in which we live. So this is an important separation between 2 points of views. And time to time, we sometimes find ourselves as a dweller, and sometimes we find ourselves as builders. And what I'm trying to point out here is that it's more important to look at the experience of the dweller, because this is where we create knowledge. This is where we create spaces. And as architects and scientists, if there is a knowledge to learn from the world, it will be produced by this world on the right, not on the world on the left. And we can look at it more, maybe this illustrates better. You see 2 images of New York. On the left, you see the skyscrapers and the buildings. On the right, you see the people. The images of New York in our minds, usually something like on the left. This is the world of a builder, where we see organizations and structures and meanings. But on the right, this is the world the dweller lives in New York. They see the streets, and more importantly, what they see, what they experience is not fixed, but it's actually temporal. They make it by actually living through it. We are walkers in the cities most of the time. We walk around the cities. We try to find ourselves. We try to find our way. We try to find shelter in cities. And Michel de Certeau says in his beautiful book, The Practice of Everyday Life, space only happens when one takes into consideration the speed, the time, the directionality. Only then we actually start understanding what space is. And this is the essence of my research at MIT. What I try to do is I try to understand different types of spatial experiences in spaces. And spatial experiences has many different properties, such as they're embodied, they're inactive, they're temporal, they're subjective, and they're privileged, meaning that every single person living in the world has a unique experience of it. It's privileged for that person particularly. And most of the times it's mundane. It's not orchestrated, it's not prepared, it's surprising, it's full of surprises, and it's generative. This is where we are actually being creative in our lives. But of course, such lists cannot be exhausted, and I'm not trying to suggest that we can just find how we experience spaces and fully understand it. Sometimes we don't even have words for our experiences, our feelings. But a computational framework will help us to start looking at the meaningful information in the world and integrate this information into other practices, such as architecture. And I find in my work, most of the times I use virtual reality because this is a media that the first time it is not representative, but it is enactive, meaning this technology does not mediate information for us, but it actually alters our live world. So from this point of view, I feel immersive technology has a true potential for finally looking into how our experiences unfold and how our mind works in everyday spaces. And most of the times I conduct experiments using virtual reality, develop experiences that simulate everyday situations, and I put people in these situations and try to explore how they engage with spaces. Of course, going into that requires us to first look where to start. We need to find a start point to start representing experiences. And of course, the start point is human mind. So virtual reality does something that we already have. It provides a way of immersively perceiving the environment. This is what we do in the real world. It enables us, it talks directly to our brains, to our spatial understanding and to our spatial memory, so that when we engage with a particular information in virtual reality, we don't look at it as a separate entity in an abstract medium, but rather we see a thing in the world that we remember spatially. And finally, although seeing is privileged in our discipline and actually in the Western world, but we don't perceive the world only through our eyes. We perceive the world through a multisensory engagement. It involves our skin, it involves our ears, smelling and tasting. So when we talk about the space, I'm not just referring to visual representation, but I'm referring to any sensory engagement that we are able to do through our bodies, including hearing it and touching to it. Although I mostly look at the visual perception of space, but I would like to discuss this aspect of space that is multimodal and multisensory. So I'm going to show you a couple of projects that we produced for the last couple of years. So this is a hospital with one entrance and two exits. It's primarily built by Deniz Tortum, and I collaborated with him in this project. This is a virtual reality documentary of Cerrahpaşa Hospital in Istanbul. What he did is he's a filmmaker, and he wanted to capture the life in the operation rooms in Cerrahpaşa University, trying to reach a probe into the operation room itself as the subject of exploration, and try to put people inside the situations to make them feel what does it feel to be in this environment. So I'm going to quickly show you a little video from it. The person wears the VR headset and goes into the space. This is a very long corridor created by Deniz. And step by step, you explore the environment that is 3D scanned from the actual space. And we also try to play with our regular perception of space by changing the rules in virtual reality, such as changing the speed and the way it affects our perception. So basically in this project, what we are seeing is how we use immersive technology to bring in different aspects of an everyday experience. And I think this is a very good example, mostly done by Deniz again. I just helped him to create this experience together. I don't want to take too much time. You can start stating on this. So after this project, we wanted to look into more architectural history side of these experiences. And again, with Tim and Nil Tuzcu, we started working on September 1955. September 1955 is a virtual reality documentary of Istanbul pogrom that happened in 6-7 September 1955 against the Greek and Armenian minorities of Istanbul. And here the question becomes, there is a familiar narrative of this story that shows the devastation of the Istiklal Street, what happened after the events. So again, going back to these two different descriptions, the building and dwelling points of views, what happened is not captured in images. What happened cannot be told through documenting the world from outside. What happened can only be understood when someone is actually within the situation. So what we wanted to do is, instead of showing documentation of the events from outside, we wanted to put people within this situation. So what we created is, from historic archives, we tried to create an imaginary space in 1950s Istanbul, a photography studio, mainly built on the work by Osep Minasoğlu and Meryem Şahinyan, two famous Armenian photographers in Istanbul at the time, and who actually witnessed the events. So we wanted to recreate and reenact the event, and to see how much we can convey the horror and the devastation it created for the people of Istanbul. At the same time, I found this an opportunity to look into new modalities for representing historical information. So our reenaction and recreation allowed us to create almost like a museum of objects that is collected from 1950s Istanbul. This is all digital reconstruction, of course, but what we were able to do is, instead of looking at all these little pieces like postcards or newspapers or magazines, we created an environment within which these objects naturally occur. I'm not sure. For example, you can see the Taksim Gazinosu postcard on this table. So in a way, we try to create a story without directly telling anything. Of course, there's a narrative, and I want to show you a little section from it as well. But here in this project, it was so clear that the experience of space is temporal, meaning it actually unfolds through time. People spending time here around 7 minutes dwelt in this space. And anytime I talk to someone who experienced this piece, they talk about how they remember the spaces. So it's a weird thing, because usually when you watch a movie, for example, you don't remember the spaces in the movie because you are consciously not within those spaces. So you remember the movie, what happened in the movie. But when you're in a virtual reality documentary or a movie, you start remembering the spaces as if you were there. So I think this is very valuable, because it tells us this type of medium talks a different part of our brains, a part that actually involves with reality itself. So before going further, let me show you some small cuts from this piece. So we have a teaser, but I'm not going to show you the teaser, but instead I'm going to show you an actual recording of an experience. Someone being there and watching the movie. So the movie is composed from two sections. The first section is the outdoor during the events and towards the end of the events. Someone is an outsider. You're looking at the streetscape. You're looking at the devastation itself. Of course, at this point, you are not aware of what's going on, especially if you're unfamiliar with the particular history. You're just seeing what happened. From there, we are taking people into the past of that same day. We are taking people to a place where nothing happened yet. Inside the studio, looking at the mundane activities, people coming, taking pictures, listening to their stories, such as this group of people who are there for a wedding picture, being prepared. They're in a hurry. They need to get this picture done and leave. They're going for the wedding. So at one point, you're starting to listen to stories and become part of their stories. And then suddenly they disappear. They're gone. So we try to use the representational medium to convey this ghostly existence of these people who are long gone. And at the same time, we try to put you in contact with them and try to be part of their experiences as well. And then we bridge these two with the culmination of the devastation. You hear a radio announcement telling you what happened, allegedly a bombing in Atatürk's house, and following that, everything changes. and you find yourself trapped because now your life road changed and now you are in danger. It's really hard to convey a feeling like a danger, of course, but this is what we did. We used different sensory modalities, the sound, the noise from the streets, and this people who are observing you and watching you and supposedly trying to attack you, ends our narrative. This was particularly interesting because what we tried to do is not to show any horror, but try to convey it without actually showing the very minute detail in between. So you never see the devastation of the space. Your space never gets broke. These people never breaks in, never attacks you. And we found it a bit weird to make this virtual reality try to attack you, but still, from people's impressions, what we understood, we actually conveyed some disturbing feelings. And suddenly people understood what does it mean to be trapped? What does it mean to be attacked in a particular setting like this Istanbul pogrom? So finally, I want to quickly talk about my ongoing research. Although I am very interested in creating virtual reality experiences and looking into architectural history, what I mostly do is I try to make machines to have some understanding of this world. And this is really hard. Artificial intelligence is not there yet. In the beginning, I told you that the real world in which we live is the one we dwell in. But unfortunately, machines doesn't have that type of world for themselves to live in. And therefore, they don't have any experiences to reflect on. So how can we make machines to start having ideas of space, ideas of being in space, and have a type of spatial awareness? This is the work I'm currently working on, the machine ethnographer. Is trying to get the human experience of space from, it is the work that enables us to learn from human experience of space and develop computational models that will enable machines to start exhibiting similar behaviors. I use, again, virtual reality to capture what people perceive, but this time I also look at their personal narratives. This is one of the interesting problems. If someone looks at the same space in September 1955, they describe it in very rich detail. So one might ask, what is missing for machines to come up with the same description? There are a lot of things they're missing, starting with the previous experience required for looking at spaces. So we might say perception requires at least partially some previous experience to look at the world. And that's what we have as humans. Throughout our lives, we learn to be in space. But we also have animals. What I do is I look at the neural representations of space as well as a start point. And this particular thing, a place cell that fires, meaning it shows some activation only when the animal is in a particular part of the environment. This might be defined as a mental myth by many. I don't intend to take it that way, but what happens here is our brains start developing in different parts of the environment and actually showing how it does it. Here we see a rat moving around a square environment, and one individual neuron, a single neuron, is only being active in this part of the environment. And there are millions of this type of neurons that fire in different parts of the room and creating a rich representation of space. So one of my works, what I did is I put people instead of rats into same situations. Of course, in order to record neurons from brain, what we do is we basically dig a hole in the animal's brain and put an electrode in it. We cannot do it to humans, right? So we try to find non-disruptive ways to collect similar information. So we created large-scale human mazes. and put people within these mazes, make them explore and record what they're saying and how they make decisions in space. And this created the basis for us to train machines to do the same thing. Here, what you see is a person trying to solve a human-scale maze in virtual reality, making decisions on the go, using their eyes to solve problems. And then we do something like this representation, looking at the mechanism behind this neural representation to train a machine that will have and to see if we can actually make a similar representation of space. And finally, we create a robot. This is the robot that will learn from human experience. And here, what happens when we train the system with the human data? The robot learns without being explicitly told to avoid walls and never crashes. So when it comes nearby the wall, it knows that it's in the edge of the room and rotates around and starts moving towards some place that it can move. So this is interesting, but of course it's not enough, especially given the complexity of architectural spaces. So now what I am doing is I'm putting people in much more realistic environments and particularly asking them to describe and observe their environments so that we start understanding how they use their language in relation to their perception, such as the example on the right. Can we make a machine to reason about human perception and experience? The examples I start is very simple. It's a bit naive. What I want my system is to talk about things in relation to each other, spatial organizations, and so on. And for that, I use 3D representations and scannings. And I record, again, what people say temporally, so we can put these narratives in play with the visual perceptions. And here's a little example. This is a toy example. It's not exactly what I'm trying to achieve, but you can see on the left, the machine looks here and says, there is an old book with some drawing on it. And it says, a while later, I didn't notice that before. Because we trained the machine with unprocessed data, all these ums and ahs and everything basically is included in the descriptions. But sometimes it's also saying, imagine, feel, see, sort of completely, for a rational, it's completely irrelevant. But for me, it tells something what happens. People use these verbs. This is a statistical model. And people use the word imagine, feel, and see when they explore spaces. And maybe this is what we ought to explore, understand about ourselves in our explorations. So I can stop here. I hope I didn't take too much time. I want to end with Marvin Minsky's famous quote. It says, no computer has ever been designed that is aware of what it is doing, but most of the time we aren't either. So I will mute myself right now and go back to video.
Yeah. Thank you a lot for the inspiring lecture. And I would like to give the microphone to the residents of Vardiya to hear their questions.
Okay, hello. By the way, thank you for your speech. Can you hear me? Yeah. It reminded me that George Perez, I don't remember the original name, but Mekan Feş Mekan, he was writing about each room he stayed, each bed he stayed. Scale goes bigger and bigger and it goes on. So after that, I tried to do it for myself, every single room that I stayed, but I wouldn't be able to remember. Then I just put it away and tried to draw my current room, but I wouldn't be able to do that. I don't even remember the room that I every day go in there and spend most of the day. So that's actually even the basic topic that we should consider. I mean, this is the first line of it. Let me say, I want to ask that. So we checked the how can I say, alternative spaces, like in 1950. It referred to the old time, and other one refers to somewhere we have never been. So what about the familiar everyday places, something like we see all the day and we don't catch up maybe? What about that? How would that work for you?
The microphone is muted.
Sorry. Yes. So thank you very much for the question. It's what you are just describing is really hard to capture, and I try to convey the first and foremost why it would be very hard. So this challenge that I'm taking on is not an easy path, because the most important quality of everyday experience is that it is privileged. Privileged means that only one person, that is you, can access your everyday experience from your behavioral point of view. Only you can tell what's going on in the world. What I'm trying to do here is trying to understand from your point of view what you're thinking. So it's actually I'm trying to go around this problem. Going into everyday spaces, maybe I should answer this question by why we should do it. Why is it important for an architect to do it? What is the value in the real world? And I think this is this has a lot of value. First of all, the human mind doesn't work as a camera that captures what's going on. Memory is not something objective. Attention plays a great role in our everyday experiences. You can go into the same exact space every day, look around, and every day you see something different. And this is not magic. This is not because, I don't know, you are not paying attention. It's more about how our mind works. Our mind is not a compartmental processing machine. It's immersed in its world. The environment determines what you can think of. And as an architect, think that you're going to make a new space, right? You're going to design a new space. And we like to talk about the experience of spaces when we design them. Although I barely see anyone who's actually looking into experience of a prospective space that they are designing. This is impossible for architects. But at the same time, we are all doing it, right? Every day we are going around spaces, observing spaces. So what we should do pedagogically is to find ways for ourselves to analyze, decompose, and compose our everyday spaces to understand what we really care for in our everyday environments. This is, I think, one way to look at it. And for me, this is my motivation, but I'm not sure if I ever will reach to that point. I'm actually in the very, very fundamental layer where I try to understand the basic components of spatial experiences, such as perceiving materials, perceiving spatial organization, understanding spatial concepts. An ordinary human is way beyond this.
Yeah, I think we can get one more question, maybe, and then we need to hang up this phone because there will be another live event at 5 p.m. Ukraine's time.
Thank you so much for your super interesting presentation. I was wondering, because since you mentioned how you use language as part of your analyses to get insight into how people perceive space and use that as a way of sort of using that method as a way to make the machines express themselves too. It's just, I was interested why you chose that as a medium, and also just the linguistic dimension and the challenges related to that when you're moving on from a person to a machine, and what part language sort of plays a role in that.
Thank you again. So in our research at the that I am in a group called Genesis, and in our group we study human stories. So this is my short answer. I think we are spatial creatures because we are able to understand, compose, and tell stories. This is the unique part of human mind. Not that we can see, but we are able to filter out things and create structures for other people to tell. So I use language because there is no other medium that I can analyze what people perceive and experience. They can also draw. I'm also doing things like make people draw their experiences, but unless you're an architect, it's not an easy task for someone to draw their experiences. So language is at least an accessible tool for us to understand the experience. And again, what I'm trying to do is reach out to human reasoning in the level of languages. And it's really hard. The second question, that the linguistic problems, it is immense. Because let me give you one example. When one person says there is a table, right? This seems so simple. It's talking about an object inside a room. What we don't know is what table is. It's a concept that is constructed in an individual mind. We have assumptions of our own, but are they talking about the material? Are they talking about its affordance, that it actually holds some objects on it? Are they talking about the particular shape of it? We can never know what people mean when they use language. We always interpret it. So there is also this challenge as well. So yes, it's what I do is I try to keep in the safe waters right now and try to look at the spatial organizations. And I'm really trying to understand how concepts work, spatial concepts work in observations, through which we can basically understand the structure and experience. Of course, I don't imply that there is structure and experience anyways, but there's a structure in language maybe.
Thank you very much. I guess we've come to the end of our roundtable.
Thank you very much again for inviting me, and you can reach me from my email for the questions.
Okay, we are grateful.
Okay.
Thank you. Goodbye.